A lot of people saw last week Elon Musk and his company SpaceX, this audacious attempt to send this rocket into space. It is massive. It's like the size of a skyscraper, 40 stories tall, just massive. The images of it are huge. And it launched, it did get off the ground. So it's not technically a failure to launch. It did get off the ground, but within about 4 minutes, it had like completely exploded. And within a couple minutes, it had turned sideways. If you're watching on YouTube, which, I'd love it if you're watching on audio, if sometimes you could make it over and see the video. We're going to show a little bit of video in this YouTube short. They kind of put together a nice compilation here. Um, they're showing the rocket actually going off of the launch pad. Happened at 9:33 a.m. on Thursday. It says 2 minutes after liftoff, a trail of flames poured out of the booster's engine. The rocket then began to spin in midair, right? This is not what you want your rockets to do. The spaceship was stacked on top of the booster and it failed to separate from it. So that was the key problem, is that the boosters that get it up into space and the actual rocket itself didn't split up. And so then you see this huge, massive explosion. And oddly enough, everyone starts to cheer like it is the 4th of July or something like that. The reactions online were very mixed, and partly because Elon Musk has put himself into the fray of political conversation, which is a very, very quick way to have a lot of people really hate you. So, a lot of people online were kind of gloating as if this is some massive failure. Of course, this rocket, I don't know how much it cost, millions of dollars, I'm sure. And it's easy to look past the fact that Elon has not only sent all of these rockets into space and that his company SpaceX is now like the main thing that's being used, even by NASA, even by the federal government, even by other world governments, to get things into orbit, and that he actually built rockets that not only take off but then come back and land so they can be reused, so he can do it for a fraction of the cost. Like, let's look past all of that and see this one giant starship blow up and then call it a failure and kind of dance on his grave. And I'm going to suggest that if you're inclined to kind of celebrate the failures of others, that you might be positioning yourself to really have a tough time advancing your own life. One of the things at MetaChurch that we talk a lot about on our staff is being willing to celebrate failure. We just read a great book by Craig Rochelle that talks about leaders who have it, and one of this intangible idea of being able to lead really well and cast vision really well, and a leader that people want to be around, and an organization that people are drawn to. And it's what we're trying to do at MetaChurch, is to have it, right? Like this magnetic thing that pulls people in and wants people to be a part of something, because we're like celebrating what we think is the most important thing in the world, which is the good news of Jesus. And so we want to have it. And one of the things he stressed in there as well is to celebrate your failures. And the people who were maybe a little bit informed understood that this was a test launch, and that really the almost miracle of getting a 40-story building thousands and thousands of feet in the air, just getting it off the ground at all, is such a massive, massive win, that even though, it could have separated and gone further, and that would have been a better use of their money and everything else, they will take the win that they got. Basically, the number one way to guarantee failure in life is just to not try. You have to have a target that you're aiming for, and you have to be willing to go for it. If you want to guarantee failure in your life, just be too afraid to start something. You know, Episode 1 of the Clayton Tyner podcast was about starting something new, because I was starting this podcast, and man, I talked about going out and leaving the walled fortress and fighting your dragon and going on the adventure of a lifetime and being courageous and not just sitting at home and putting a plan together and writing it down and executing on it. And, imagine 13 episodes in, when life goes a little bit sideways for me and I have to step away, and I basically don't show back up to the podcast for 2 years. And I still have episode 1 online. That's like, you got to start something and you got to see it through and you got to come to the end. That was, in effect, some form of failure to have started it and been consistent for 13 weeks in a row, and then just to have stepped away for a long time. But I don't see it that way. I always knew I would come back to it. I was nervous to come back to it. But in that step away, I got fresh vision for the podcast. And when I was ready to come back, I already have this camera. It is not the nicest camera. In fact, it's one of the cheapest cameras that will shoot in 720p. I already have the lights. Are they the nicest lights? No. They're like the best 3-star rated lights that you can buy on Amazon for under $50. Like, I've got the stuff though. I've got the microphone. It's not the Shure microphone that your favorite podcaster uses. It's the $20 version of that. But I had this stuff in place because I had started and I had some vision for it. And so I was able, when the time was right and when my life opened up a little bit, to come back to it. And so often we're so afraid of failure and we're so afraid of what people will think about us. And imagine if Elon Musk was so paralyzed by all the people dancing on the grave of his starship blowing up in the middle of the air that he wasn't willing to do anything else with his life. If you read Elon Musk's biography, which I have right over here, what you find out is that he had a lot of failures along the way. And if you look at Tesla's history, like basically every timeline he's ever put out hasn't really happened. There is a great quote as we try to look at some ancient wisdom from Marcus Aurelius. He says, if a thing is humanly possible, consider it within your reach. Like, if it is possible, consider that you might actually be able to do it. Now, this isn't like Oprah, manifest it, name it, and claim it. This is like, be willing to put your tail on the line, to actually go public and declare what you're going after, to put a plan in place and be willing to work harder than anyone else is willing to work to see it happen. I've kind of gotten used to public failures. One of the things that we decided early on, and honestly, I decided before we ever started MetaChurch, is we are going to be bold and we're going to be audacious. And when we outgrew the saloon that we were meeting in on Sunday mornings, we started looking for a new place, and we really thought we had found the place. And it even seemed like there was a lot of providential things that had happened to make it possible. And I got on stage in front of 1,000 some odd people and talked about how we're going to take this place and we're going to charge that mountain and we're going to go after it and we're going to raise funds for it. And when I say it fell apart spectacularly, like a 40-story starship in midair, it fell apart spectacularly like a 40-story starship in midair. It was painful. And I had to get back up on that stage after casting vision for a couple of years and let people know that that wasn't going to, in fact, happen. And yet, because we had organized ourselves towards this huge target on the wall, which the target was never that building, the target was expanding. And because we had begun the fundraising process, and because we had gotten our minds around moving, and because we had learned about the real estate market, and because we had met all of these great connections in the community, when the right building opened up, like as soon as the other one fell apart, we were able to go after it and execute, and God moved. And we got a space that we now have, this beautiful 22,000 square foot building for our church community that is so much better than the one that we were actually looking for. You can't be afraid to fail. In the book of Proverbs, which is the book of wisdom in scripture, it says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Where there is no vision, the people perish. And you often hear this verse quoted, even by secular people who are talking about leadership and vision. But often you don't hear the second half of the verse, where there is no vision, the people perish. But happy is he who keeps the law. The number one way to guarantee failure is just to not try. And so what does it mean to try? Number one, it means to have a big vision, to actually have this massive goal. What author Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great and Great by Choice and How the Mighty Fall, he calls a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. It's this idea where, like, if you shoot for the stars, then maybe you'll get to the moon. But man, the moon is a lot further away than like San Antonio, Texas, right? So you put this giant goal out there, and that's what Elon Musk has done. Elon Musk has said, we are going to send human beings to live on Mars. That's a pretty big, hairy, audacious goal. And he's already said, I'm not going to see that in my lifetime, but I'm going to work towards it. And part of what you understand when you start really reading what he has put together is that everything he does is to that end. That Tesla isn't just about building cars and environmental sustainability, that all the things that are going on in Tesla are all feeding the same dream of getting people to Mars. SpaceX is feeding the dream of getting people to Mars. The Boring Company, where they're putting all these tunnels under the ground, it's feeding the vision of getting people to Mars. Even PayPal, which you may not know, he was on the ground of starting. That all of that is all aiming towards his same ultimate goal. And he has had so many failures along the way, and almost all of them have been public failures. And I really believe that the difference between people who really see success and impact and the people who just kind of navigate through the status quo of life is often the willingness to be humiliated in public failure. And, it's like a lot of people stay single for this reason, or they settle in their relationships for this reason, because the moment that you like publicly address, the moment I told my homeboys that I was going after Katie to be my wife, this unbelievable, beautiful, talented, single mother of two. Like when I was this dreadlock, you know, young guy, touring musician, everyone was like, "You're crazy." And I put myself up for public humiliation. And so you got to do that. And I love Proverbs because it starts with that idea. You have to have this big, giant, massive, scary goal where there is no vision, the people perish. But most people stop there. They put their little ellipses, dot, 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 and they don't go through the rest of it. The rest of the verse says, "But happy is he who keeps the law." Now, Proverbs is written in the Old Testament. Those are the Jewish scriptures. It's written in the context of ancient Israel, where everyone was held to the law, the 613 rules, regulations, and commandments. So, what was the law in this scenario? The law was the incremental, actionable steps to accomplish the vision for the life that God laid out for his people. And the vision was big. Like the initial call to Abraham to start the nation of Israel was, "I will make you into a great nation. Your descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the sky, as numerous as the sand on the seashore." And even more importantly, that he would use this one nation to open the door of blessing to all nations, which we know was finally fulfilled in the person of Jesus. So it's like the savior of the world, God in human flesh, was going to come through the lineage of these great people. But the law was these small, incremental, actionable steps to get them to the big picture. And so you need both of these. And this is part of what this Starship launch was. It was an incremental, actionable step. Let's see if we can get a rocket the size of a 40-story building off the freaking ground. Because if we can do that, then maybe we can get it into orbit. And if we can do that, then maybe we can get it to Mars. It's all these incremental, actionable steps. These can also be called lag goals and lead goals. Like the big goals, the lag goal, the thing that you're actually going for at the end of all of it. And then under that, all of these lead goals, hundreds of lead goals, all the boxes to check, where if you do all of those, then you get to this. And a lot of times people have one or the other. A lot of people are like box checking people. And so they'll lay out 30 things they have to do every single day, but it's not, none of it is pointing towards one like orienting principle of a giant goal. And other people are big dreamers, right? But big dreamers often have personalities that push them away from actually taking the actionable steps. And so they dream about having this incredible life and this big vision, this big picture, but they never have any of the lead goals that would actually get them there. And so their dream always stays a dream. And other people, they're taking all of the right steps, but their steps aren't unified in the direction that they're taking their life. You need both of those. And you can't treat a failed lead goal like your rocket blowing up midair as a failed lag goal, like the whole vision is done and you're a complete failure. In fact, oftentimes you have to lose quite a few battles in order to win the war. And if you're not willing to fight those battles and fight them publicly and fight for your vision and work harder than anyone else and put yourself out there, then you're probably going to be swept along by the current of culture. You're going to be easily distracted and you're going to live a less than impactful life. And at the end of all of it, there's a good reminder in the Psalms. It says, "Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain," which is something like, be bold and audacious, have this big vision and put a plan in place to accomplish it, but also stay humble, because at the end of all of it, we are small and finite. And I would actually argue that unless we're actually living our life for something greater than just the here and now, then you can get people to Mars, but without some transcendent meaning, then what have you really accomplished?